Carmel. I am a 2016 Carmel High School graduate. I moved to Carmel from a small town in Florida in 2013. The 3 years I spent at Carmel High School were some of the most mentally strenuous years of my life. It was at Carmel High School that I learned truly what it meant to be a Black person in the United States. At Carmel, where problems are oftentimes swept under the rug, everything on the surface appeared to be a place where citizens were colorblind and everyone was safe. But it isn't. From the first day I stepped onto the campus, from having my personal space invaded simply for white students to touch and awe at my hair, to one of the friends of my first real boyfriend saying to me in passing that he was surprised my boyfriend was into girls like me, I never felt safe. From teachers participating in microaggressions, which included assuming I was ghetto or simply another angry Black girl when I would correct them on their covertly racist statements, I never felt safe. To the white citizens of Carmel, this is a utopia, separate from the violence and ethnic landscape of Indianapolis. To people of color, Carmel is a sundown town. A town that would have been in a green book with a bold black arrow warning how white citizens will call the cops on you if you step into the wrong grocery store for a snack on the road, where white citizens will slow their cars to watch you accusingly as you water your front yard, where white citizens can call you a nigger while you're out walking your dog, to white citizens of Carmel, there is nowhere safer. To Black citizens, Carmel is a glass menagerie where racism is allowed to thrive and where you fear for your livelihood for speaking out. Where superintendents and principals and council persons shut up dissent with blatant lies and frilly language. Where nothing outside of the white experience is allowed to exist.
And it was actually with the teacher, so that was kind of scary for me. And also confusing because I'm actually adopted by like white people, so then when people would say something to me like, oh, like, why can't you speak Chinese, or like, why can't you like use chopsticks well? At first it was actually like confusing for me because I was like, why are you saying this about me? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, just because I look like this does not mean I'm like naturally able to do these things. So that was frustrating. And then also since like I didn't have the wording to like explain like why it was confusing. And then going back to the incident with the teacher, he was like a science teacher, and in class we were doing this like lab where we would pick up marbles with chopsticks. And I remember he like explicitly made the point to say in front of the entire class, oh, I bet like Anna and Olivia are gonna be like good at this lab. And well, Olivia was the only other like Asian person in the class. And that was like, first of all, really awkward because he said it in front of the entire class. And then also what I think made it worse is that him and I have talked before, and he asked me like, oh, like, where are you from? Like, where are you really from? And like in that conversation, I told him I was adopted. So he knew my family was like majority white. So for him to say that, when they were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, the teacher was like, basically encouraging using the N-word. Like when they're reading, they're like, it's a learning experience. And like my brother was saying, like a lot of kids in the class felt uncomfortable reading it, and you could tell like when they came to the word they're like but then the teacher was like, it's a learning experience. And then also at the end of that class, she didn't explain like why you shouldn't use this like in real life, like outside of the learning experience, like when she was like kind of pushing them to read it. So I think that's messed up.
I guess trying to think back, a lot of things. I would never really be allowed to, in high school mainly, to start any type of conversation regarding race. A teacher would always shut it down pretty quickly. I don't know if it was just because they were uncomfortable or they didn't want to risk other students being uncomfortable. I was never trying to be like aggressive about it, just truly a discussion. And they were like, let's change the subject. Let's talk about something else. I know like in one like instance in particular, it was during the Baltimore riots. I was talking about that. I wouldn't say emotional, but I was getting a little like worked up because I was getting frustrated because a student had said like, I don't understand why they have to break things or why they have to set things on fire. And like, well, they're frustrated and angry. This is years and years and years of like oppression and segregation and the police brutality all coming to a head. And I was just trying to explain that, and the teacher, during my explanation, she shut it down. She was like, no, like, okay, like, I think that was a good talk for now, like, we're done. And I was like, but we're not done. Like, I thought we were finally getting some leeway. I thought we were finally talking about it. And she just didn't want it to, I guess, to escalate, even though I don't know how I would escalate it. I don't yell or like get violent in any way, especially not in a school setting. So there was that happened. Understood that. Being told by students throughout my entire life and classmates, you know, you don't sound like a black girl, or you don't talk black, or even being told in front of other teachers, like, because I would come in, I'd be excited for Black History Month, especially during school. I'd be like, hey, it's Black History Month, guys, and I would announce it, and they'd be like, oh, that doesn't count for you. Like, you're not actually black. Like, in front of teachers are like, classic Steve, like, got her good. I'm like, did he? So that's happened. I've been cyberbullied online about it, and I never bothered to bring it to a teacher's attention because I knew no one's going to do anything to these kids, because they'll say there was no direct threat made, or I started it in a way, but I don't know, I'd be called names and slurs all the time, and no one would ever say anything. I know my brother was once called a slur in middle school. He's been called it twice. The first time it made him physically sick. He was home from school for 3 days. Again, nothing happened to the other kid. And the other time it was on the bus. My brother decked the other kid. My brother was the one suspended from the bus for a week. The other kid was not. He was talked to. So I don't know how that happens. It just really made me like lose faith very quickly in the Carmel Clay school system. That
moved back here from Farmington Hills, Michigan. Ashton was in 5th grade, like I said, and at that time Ashton had received awards for her reading abilities. She's a pretty good student, and when she was into her classes in 5th grade, she came home one day and she said to me something about being pulled out of class. And I said, you were pulled out of class? And she said, yes, they pulled me out of class so I could go to a reading class so I could learn to read better. I said, well, excuse me? And she said, yes, they pulled me out of class and said that it was a class that helped me learn to read better. So I went to the school and I asked to speak to Principal Wilson at the time. That was the principal at the time, and she was not available. And I questioned the secretaries about Ashton's schedule, and they said that I could speak to Dr. Wilson when she returned, because they didn't have any information or didn't want to do any speaking about it. I think it was a counselor there at the time, and I spoke with her, and she told me she would let me speak with Dr. Wilson directly. However, I left the school and I walked over to the school board, and I wanted to speak to someone over there because I wanted to know about those practices and how was my daughter in a classroom that I knew nothing about. And it was an obvious mistake, because I was like, did you all even look at her records? How did she get into this reading class to raise her level when she has won awards on her reading levels? And she's never struggled in that area. And I could understand if there was math, because she did a little struggle. She struggled a little bit in math, but it was not. And by the time I left the school board, I got no answers that day. But by the time I got home, Dr. Wilson had called me personally and apologized and said that mistakes happen. She understood my concern, and she didn't know how that could have happened. But it was just a mistake. And then I expressed the same thing I said to the school board and to the counselor. Did you all even look at her school records? Did you just think, here's a minority and we can put her in a class for whatever reason? I said, and pretty much kind of, to me, it was like a negative mark, a derogatory mark on her record, because she didn't need that. Anyway, she said that a young girl in the class called her the N-word, and she wasn't like Ashton. My daughter is kind of passive, she's going to let things slide, but this young lady was not. She was from Chicago, and so I'm not saying anything about Chicago, but she was used to defending herself. That's what I mean by that. And so she defended herself. And when I got to the school, they called me, because I was the person to call. When I got to the school, the young lady that she was in the altercation with, who started it, was protected and in the nurse's office with a police officer. And the young lady that I come to support, she was sitting by herself in tears. No adult was around her. there was no comfort and no support for her.
By that I mean that there was little to no real opportunities to learn about the authentic cultures out there, the backgrounds, the religions. It was very much a whitewashed institution. And there was potentially Spanish club, but that was again not a authentic attempt to learn about what the history of the Spanish language or Latinx individuals was. With that being said, again, there was little to no opportunities for these students to ever be immersed in different environments.
I searched and searched and searched for any indication that Carmel Clay schools had an awareness about implicit bias, if there was implicit bias in anti-racist education amongst the staff, if they had any awareness about scapegoating our Black and brown children, tracking racial abuse, discipline disparities. I couldn't find anything. So I think it would be really helpful for the school district to have a well-written district-wide anti-racist policy. Our son, during kindergarten, he was actually hit in the head by another student, and the response that I got from the school nurse, and I'm not saying this is wrong or that she lied I'm not blaming her at all. She said, well, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was the explanation that I got. And what I want to know, I want to be confident that our son is Black, our daughter is white. Well, she looks very white, but she's got very Black, deep ancestral roots. I want to know that they will be treated exactly, the same. I want to know that our son would receive the same amount of compassion and empathy for an injury as our daughter would most likely receive. I want to know the school is aware of the fact that America has turned a blind eye to Black bodily harm for centuries. And the other thing that catches the other red flags I had during the school year, our son in kindergarten was not included in any of pictures. The fun pictures that the kindergartner teacher sends out? Our son was never included in any of them. And he was not included in the kindergarten class picture for the school year, for the yearbook. He was switched to another teacher second semester, and I received pictures with him in it. He was included all the time.
I was at a football game, and we were playing North Central. And I remember, because I was standing in the front stands of the football game, I usually don't really go to football games. I feel like, I don't know, me as a person who plays sports, it's like, I don't really want to watch any more other sports. And so I remember going to this game, and there was a couple of students that were, because you know how, like, I guess back during that time, like, North Central and Carmel were sort of rivals. And so I just remember going out into the parking lot, and I just remember seeing these two white kids in blackface, and it was just black paint that was just on their face. They were dressed up as if they were in North Central gear. And I just didn't feel like it was appropriate to sort of do that in this. I didn't think it was appropriate at all to really do it. And so them like coming in public out with it like that, I felt like this isn't right. And I'm really surprised that like no one ever like saw them, took a photo of them or anything of that sort. I'm surprised it didn't really blow up as much as it did, but I just noticed when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is truly insane. I can't believe that we're still living in a time period where people think that this is okay, despite whether you're joking, despite whether you think that it's for laughs, like it's not funny to pretend to try to be someone else, knowing the background of blackface and what it does to someone. But yeah, definitely when I was at the football game, I saw that, and that was really crazy to me. Just having to see that.
Honestly, probably the first experience that I had was like you know how we had a Zoom call before this? Like seeing Mr. Ziegler there, like I never had him as a teacher, but I like would recognize you in the hallway, and like I was like, oh my gosh, like he cares. Like it was like honestly like emotional, like I'm gonna like cry right now, but like just like feeling supportive. was really big. And then also Kim Johnson, like I had her as a teacher, and I always thought like I felt like welcome in her classroom and stuff, and seeing her like being like an active like activist was really meaningful. And like I'm glad that you guys are there to make like a positive impact for the future.
I was lucky enough to have teachers like James Ziegler and Peter O'Toole at Carmel High School. Both of these white men allowed me the space to speak openly about my experiences and never once made me feel as though these experiences were lesser than. Both of these men acknowledged the privileges they held and allowed not only me, but every person of color who passed through their classrooms the only safe space to be found in Carmel's walls.
I would say the only teacher that I felt that kind of gave me honest feedback was my, I want to say he was my government or social studies teacher, Mr. Elder, but 9 times out of 10, there wasn't really anyone I could go to.
For example, I myself identified as DACA, but there was no guidance from my guidance counselor. There was no one at Carmel who I could really talk to or ask for help.
Regarding racial equity, it's disappointing and I don't want to say it, but it's the truth, like no.
I don't know if they were just too painful to talk about, but she just never talked about it. All I knew is that she wanted to go to another school. She wanted to leave Carmel School. She asked me every year if she could transfer to another school out of Carmel's district. And I just wouldn't allow her to because I knew the education was valuable. And that was the reason why we moved to the neighborhood and moved to the town, to the city for the education. And I often, as a parent, I often look back and wonder if I made a mistake. You know, yeah, I wanted her to have those experiences that I never had, but at what cost? At what cost do we do that in exchange? It's tough. It's tough for us. Whew. It's tough. Yeah.
You look like you're getting emotional.
Yeah, I am. I am. My daughter went through a lot.
Without Carmel High School, I would have had to step into the world oblivious to how vile and uncompassionate people could be. I was lucky to start dating my current partner in the senior year of my time at Carmel High School. The last few months of my high school career was spent at his house in tears, crying over how disheartened and alone I felt at a school who refused to acknowledge me outside of simply being a spectacular oddity. Being a student at Carmel High School also meant that I had the ability to participate in honors classes. However, because I was also experiencing racial discrimination on top of the stress of doing honors and college-level classes, I was overworked. I had to combat both the extensive and oppressive schoolwork and the oppressive atmosphere of living in a town where people think racism doesn't exist.
Insecure, very insecure and ashamed to be black. And that sounds extreme, but that is how I felt for a very long time. Hated my hair, hated the way I looked. I wanted to be invisible, and to me being invisible was being white and blending in, because for most of the time I was the only black kid in class. You know, like, oh, why aren't you faster? Like, aren't you black? Aren't black people fast? That's been said to me in middle school. And I'm like, well, if I'm white, my hair won't be like this, so I won't have to deal with it. I won't have to deal with people touching it. If I'm white, people won't be shocked when they hear me talk. They won't be shocked when they hear my voice. Or they won't be shocked when they say, oh, I like to read. For some reason, that's a shocking fact for people. So it just for pretty much up until my junior year of high school, I was very insecure in who I was and being a woman of color and a person of color.
It kind of made me really mad because it's like we've progressed so much as like a culture that to actually witness that and see that, it kind of feels like a slap in the face. Like, we've done so well, you know, just trying to, you know, get past certain historical points, that to see that it's like, okay, like, people are still teaching these types of things, like, it's okay, when it's really not. And so it just made me really angry. And I remember going back home that same night and telling my parents about that and how like angry I was. I was angry to a point where I was actually crying, like, because it was just like having to witness that and feel like, well, what's next, like, at this point? Because I feel like being in Carmel High School, I've heard the N-word. I felt as though like I was, you know, not really included in a lot of things. Feeling as though you're not being embraced in academics, being as viewed as like uneducated. And so having to experience and just look at that and see that it's like, okay, like what's the next thing like that's gonna happen? Because now I just feel like things are kind of becoming more, I feel like they're becoming more strenuous, and I don't know how much I could really take of just seeing so much of like racial injustice and just racial things happening, even within the school system. Yeah, it's one of those things that like I really try to forget about that story, because it does like make me angry. Even to this day, it still makes me angry. But yeah. But yeah. So that's just, it made me feel like, it made me just feel like I was seen like from a historical content, like I was seen as just the N-word, or I was seen as just this person. And I feel like a lot of Black people just want to just feel like they're embraced and that they're included, and that it's not just about feeling as though we want to be treated better than someone else. It's like we just want to be treated equally and have a fair shot. And I feel like in the Carmel school system, I feel like they kind of failed us as Black kids. So yeah.